Admiral Yuna stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship. Through the massive window, she watched a small blue planet grow larger as the ship moved closer. Earth, the homeworld of humans. The species that had done something no other race had ever done before. They had stopped the Valari Empire. For 3 years, the war had raged across dozens of star systems. The Valari had won every war they had ever fought. They had conquered 17 alien civilizations. They had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. Their fleet was the largest in the known galaxy. Their warriors were bred for combat from birth. And yet, these humans had refused to lose. Yuna remembered the reports from the early battles. Her commanders had laughed at the human ships. They were small and primitive. Their weapons were weak. Their shields failed after a few hits. Victory seemed certain. But the humans did not retreat when their ships were damaged. They did not surrender when they were outnumbered. They flew their burning vessels directly into Valari formations. They ejected from destroyed fighters and continued shooting with handheld weapons. They died by the thousands, and more kept coming. The war had cost the Valari Empire more ships than the last 5 wars combined. And in the end, neither side had won. Both were exhausted. Both had lost too much. The diplomats had stepped in before total destruction found them all. The peace treaty was simple. A marriage between a high-ranking Valari officer and a human of equal standing. A symbol of unity between two species that had spent years trying to kill each other. Yuna had volunteered for this duty. She believed she was sacrificing herself for her people. She expected to spend the rest of her life trapped with a savage creature from a primitive world. Her betrothed was a man named Taiho Park. He was a captain in the human navy. During the Battle of Proxima, he had personally destroyed 4 Valari destroyers. His tactics had killed over 2,000 of her people. Yuna had studied his record carefully. She expected to hate him. The wedding took place on a neutral space station far from both homeworlds. Thousands of cameras broadcast the ceremony to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Valari stood on one side of the Great Hall. Humans stood on the other. Armed guards watched everyone with nervous eyes. Yuna wore the traditional armor of a Valari bride. It was black and silver, decorated with the symbols of her family's military victories. She stood tall at nearly 2.5 meters. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and dark. Her people were beautiful by galactic standards. They knew this and took pride in it. Then Taiho walked into the hall, and Yuna felt confusion for the first time. He was small, so small. The top of his head barely reached her chest. His skin was a warm brown color. His hair was black and cut short. He wore a simple dark uniform with no decorations except for a few medals on his chest. He walked calmly through the crowd of aliens who towered over him on all sides. He did not look afraid. He did not look angry. When his eyes met hers, she saw only a quiet curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he wanted to solve. The ceremony was short. Words were spoken in both languages. Documents were signed. And then they were married. Just like that, enemies became family. Afterward, there was a reception. Diplomats from both sides made speeches about peace and hope and new beginnings. Yuna barely listened. She was watching Taiho, trying to understand this creature she was now bound to. A group of humans approached them. They carried a wooden box, old and worn from many years of use. One of them, an elderly woman with gray hair, presented it to Yuna with trembling hands. "A gift," the woman said. "From Earth for your new home." Yuna opened the box. Inside were small brown objects. Seeds, just seeds. She did not understand why several humans in the group had tears in their eyes. Later, when they were alone in their new quarters on the station, she asked Taiho about it. They are cherry blossom seeds, he explained. His voice was softer than she expected, not the voice of a killer. Cherry trees are special to my people. They bloom with beautiful pink flowers every spring, but the flowers only last for about 2 weeks. Then they fall. That seems pointless, Una said. Why value something so temporary? Taiho smiled. It was a strange expression, sad and warm at the same time. My grandmother used to take me to see the cherry blossoms when I was young, he said. She told me that the most beautiful things are often the most temporary. That is what makes them precious. Because they do not last forever, we must appreciate them while they are here. Una did not understand. The Valari valued permanence, strength, things that endured. Why would anyone celebrate something that was designed to die? She placed the box of seeds on a shelf and decided to study them later. There was much she needed to learn about humans, their weaknesses, their secrets, information that could help her people if the peace ever failed. She looked at her new husband, this small strange creature who killed thousands and spoke softly about flowers. She had no idea that everything she believed was about to change. She had no idea that the seeds were not just a gift. They were a warning, a reminder that humans found beauty in death, that they did not fear endings, that they had made peace with loss in a way the Valari never had, and that made them more dangerous than Una could possibly imagine. 6 months passed on the space station. Una had a mission. She was supposed to study humans and report their weaknesses to Valari High Command. She spent every day watching, listening, and taking notes. But the report she was writing made no sense. Instead of weaknesses, she kept finding impossible things. Taiho worked long hours every day, sometimes 16 hours without rest. He coordinated the resettlement of refugees from the war. Thousands of families had lost their homes. They lived in temporary shelters on the station, waiting for new places to go. Taiho helped them find housing, jobs, schools for their children. One evening, Una watched him return to their quarters. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red. His shoulders were bent with tiredness. This work is beneath your rank, she told him. You are a decorated captain. You should have assistants doing these tasks. Taiho looked at her with confusion. Someone has to help those families. They lost everything because of the war. Our war. They are not your responsibility. Then whose responsibility are they? Una had no answer for this. In the Valari Empire, refugees were processed by low-ranking bureaucrats. High officers did not concern themselves with such matters. It was inefficient for valuable personnel to waste time on common people. But Taiho did not seem to care about efficiency. The next week, Una followed him to the refugee camp. She stayed hidden and watched. Taiho walked through the rows of temporary shelters, stopping to talk with families. He remembered their names. He asked about their children. He listened to their stories. Then she saw him reach into his pocket and pull out small toys, colorful figures made of plastic. He gave them to the children, who grabbed them with eager hands. Their laughter echoed through the camp. Later, Una checked the station records. Taiho had purchased those toys with his own credits, not military funds, his personal money. She calculated that he spent nearly a quarter of his salary on gifts for refugee children. Why? She asked him that night. Why spend your own resources on strangers? They are not strangers, Taiho said simply. They are children who have lost their homes. Some of them watched their parents die. A toy will not fix that, but maybe it will help them smile for a few minutes. Maybe that is enough. Some of those children are Valari, Una pointed out. Their parents died fighting against humans. Against you. Against... Taiho's face did not change. They did not choose their parents. They did not start the war. They are just kids, Yuna. They deserve toys and laughter like any other children. Yuna wrote this in her report, but she did not know what category to put it in. Was this a weakness? A strength? She could not decide. As the months passed, she noticed the same pattern everywhere on the station. Humans formed attachments to everything around them. Lieutenant Hemin worked in the communication center. Every morning, he talked to the coffee machine before using it. He called it his friend. He thanked it for making good coffee. When the machine broke down, he spent his free time repairing it instead of requesting a new one. Chief Engineer Hannah treated the station's reactor like a living thing. She called it grandmother. She talked to it softly while making adjustments. She claimed she could hear when something was wrong just by listening to its hum. Even the human soldiers showed this strange behavior. Ensign Dohan was a young Marine who guarded the docking bays. During a pirate attack, a Valari soldier was wounded in the crossfire. The same Valari who had been shooting at Dohan moments before. Without hesitation, Dohan ran into the open, grabbed the wounded alien, and dragged him to safety. He was shot twice during the rescue. Yuna visited Dohan in the medical bay afterward. His arms were covered in bandages. His face was pale from blood loss, but he was smiling. Why? Yuna demanded. That Valari was your enemy. He was trying to kill you. Why risk your life for him? Dohan shrugged like the answer was obvious. He was hurt. He needed help. What else was I supposed to do? Leave him there to die? Yes, Yuna said. That is exactly what you were supposed to do. He was an enemy combatant. Dohan shook his head slowly. Ma'am, with respect, that is not how we do things. Enemy or not, he was a person in pain. I could not just walk away. Yuna left the medical bay with more questions than answers. She sat alone in her quarters and read through her notes. Pages and pages of observations. Humans caring for enemies. Humans bonding with machines. Humans sacrificing themselves for strangers. It made no logical sense. In the Valari Empire, resources were precious. Energy was not wasted on sentiment. The strong survived. The weak were left behind. This was the natural order of things. But humans did not follow the natural order. They attached themselves to everything and everyone around them. They built networks of loyalty that crossed every boundary. Enemy, friend, machine, animal. It did not matter. If something was near a human long enough, it became precious to them. And precious things, Yuna realized with growing unease, were things humans would fight to protect. She finally understood why her people had failed to break them. The Valari fought for territory and resources. They could calculate acceptable losses. They could sacrifice pieces to win the game. Humans did not calculate. They did not sacrifice pieces. Because to them, nothing was just a piece. Everything mattered. Everyone mattered. And that made them impossible to defeat. 1 year after the wedding, a Valari diplomatic ship arrived at the station. It carried Ambassador Keth, one of the oldest and most powerful members of the High Council. He had been one of the architects of the war against humanity. He had voted to attack Earth. He had promised victory within 6 months. The war had lasted 3 years. Victory never came. Keth requested a private meeting with Yuna. They met in a secure conference room, far from human ears. The ambassador was old. His blue skin faded to gray in places. But his 4 eyes were still sharp and cold. I have read your reports, Keth said without greeting. Disappointing. Yuna kept her face calm. My reports are accurate observations of human behavior. They are sentimental nonsense. Keth waved one clawed hand dismissively. Stories about humans playing with children and talking to machines. This is not useful intelligence. With respect, Ambassador, These observations explain why we lost. We did not lose, Keth snapped. The war ended in a draw. We did not win. For the Valari Empire, that is the same as losing. Keth's eyes narrowed. You have grown soft, Admiral. Living among these creatures has clouded your judgment. Perhaps we should recall you. Send someone stronger. Una stood her ground. You should send someone smarter instead. Someone who can see what I have seen. These humans are not what we thought they were. She walked to the room's display screen and pulled up files she had been collecting for months. Human history. Wars fought on their homeworld before they ever reached the stars. Stories that made Valari battles look like minor disagreements. Look at this, she said. The Siege of Stalingrad. A human city attacked by other humans during one of their world wars. The defenders ran out of food. They ate rats. They ate leather from their boots. They froze to death in the cold. Over 1 million humans died. But they refused to surrender. They held that city until their enemies were destroyed. Keth watched the images scroll past. Dead humans frozen in snow. Buildings reduced to rubble. Soldiers fighting with broken weapons. All species resist at first, he said, but his voice was less certain now. This is not resistance. This is something else. Una changed the display. The Long March. Human soldiers walked 8,000 kilometers through mountains and swamps to escape their enemies. They lost 90% of their forces. The survivors kept walking. They won their war 10 years later. More images. More stories. Humans who had set themselves on fire rather than surrender. Humans who had crashed planes into enemy ships. Humans who had stood in front of tanks with nothing but their bodies. They have a phrase, Una said quietly. Give me liberty or give me death. I used to think it was just words, propaganda. All species make bold claims. But humans mean it. Every word, every time. She turned to face Keth directly. Ambassador, do you know how the human nuclear age began? They dropped atomic weapons on their own planet, on themselves. Because one group of humans would rather destroy cities than allow another group to win. They killed hundreds of thousands of their own species in seconds. Keth was silent now. The confidence had faded from his face. We were not fighting a species that could be conquered, Una continued. We were fighting a species that would rather burn their own worlds than kneel. They do not fear death. They do not fear loss. The only thing they fear is submission. She thought about Taiho, her husband. The gentle man who planted flowers and played with refugee children. The same man who had destroyed 4 Valari destroyers without hesitation. Who woke up some nights screaming from memories of battles he had won. Humans contain multitudes. Softness and steel existed in the same body. The same heart that wept for a dying flower could order the destruction of an entire fleet. The war is over, Una said firmly. It must stay over. If we attack them again, they will not stop until one of our species is extinct. And, Ambassador, I am no longer certain which species that would be. Keth was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, What do you recommend? Peace. Peace. Real peace. Not the temporary kind we use between conquests. Humans do not forget enemies. But they also do not forget friends. If we become their allies, they will defend us with the same fury they used to defend themselves. You want us to become their friends? Keth made the words sound disgusting. I want us to survive. Una met his eyes without flinching. I have seen what humans do for those they love. I would rather have that power on our side than against us. Keth left the station the next day. He did not tell Una what he would report to the High Council. She did not ask. That night, she found Taiho in their quarters, tending to the cherry tree they had grown from the seeds. It was small still, barely reaching his waist, but it had survived. Against all odds, in the artificial light of a space station, it had grown. The ambassador came to convince you to restart the war, did he not? Taiho asked without looking up. Yuna was not surprised that he knew. Humans were better at reading situations than most species realized. Yes. And what did you tell him? Yuna walked over and stood beside her husband. She looked at the small tree, at its thin branches reaching upward, at the tiny buds that might one day become flowers. I told him the truth, she said. I told him that your species terrifies me, and that is exactly why we should be friends instead of enemies. Taiho finally looked up at her. His brown eyes were warm, understanding, and somewhere deep inside them, she could see the steel that had killed 2,000 of her people. That might be the wisest thing a Valari has ever said, he replied softly. She hoped the High Council would listen. She feared they would not. The attack came on a quiet morning. Yuna was in the garden section of the station, checking on the cherry tree, when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed. The floor shook from distant explosions. Within seconds, her military training took over. She ran toward the command center. The station's main screen showed the threat. A fleet of 40 warships had appeared from nowhere. They wore the markings of the Kreth Dominion, a ruthless empire from beyond the galactic rim. Raiders and slavers who attacked weak targets and disappeared before anyone could respond. They had calculated perfectly. The station was lightly defended. The Valari and humans stationed there had been too busy watching each other to notice the real danger. An easy target. A quick raid. Thousands of slaves to sell in distant markets. They had calculated wrong. Commander Suho, the station's human commanding officer, was already issuing orders when Yuna arrived. His voice was calm and steady. No panic, no hesitation. Around him, humans and Valari worked side by side at their stations. Shields to maximum. All weapons online. Launch all fighters. I want firing solutions on their lead ships in 30 seconds. Sir, we are outnumbered 4-1, a Valari officer reported. Then we will have to shoot straighter than they do. Commander Suho turned to Yuna. Admiral, will your people fight alongside us? It was not really a question. Yuna could see Valari officers already taking positions at weapons consoles. The old hatred was forgotten. Right now, they were all just people trying to survive. We will fight, she said. The battle began. Yuna watched from the command center as the station's defenders threw themselves against the Kreth fleet. Human and Valari fighters flew in mixed formations. They covered each other. They sacrificed themselves to save their former enemies. Lieutenant Hemin, who talked to coffee machines every morning, sat at the weapons console. His face was completely still. His eyes were cold and empty. He called out targets with machine-like precision. Every shot hit exactly where he aimed. The friendly, smiling young man was gone. In his place sat a killer. Chief Engineer Hannah kept the shields running far beyond their normal limits. She talked to the reactor in a soft voice, asking it for more power, thanking it for holding together. And somehow, impossibly, the ancient machine gave her everything she asked for. A Kreth boarding party breached the station's lower decks. Ensign Dohang led the response team. The same young man who had risked his life to save a wounded Valari now led his squad into the breach. Reports came back in fragments. Heavy fighting. Casualties on both sides. Dohan was wounded twice but refused to fall back. His squad retook 3 decks before the Kreth retreated. But it was Taiho who truly terrified Yuna. Her husband stood at the tactical display, coordinating the entire defense. He moved pieces across the screen like a master playing a game. But this was not a game. Real ships, real people. Life and death with every decision. Taiho's voice never rose above a conversational tone. He gave orders that sent hundreds to their deaths. He calculated acceptable losses without flinching. He exploited every weakness in the enemy formation with surgical precision. This was the man who had destroyed 4 Valari destroyers. This was the warrior behind the gentle smile. And watching him work, Yuna finally understood why her people had never broken the humans. Taiho did not fight with anger. He did not fight with hatred. He fought with absolute terrifying competence. Every decision was correct. Every sacrifice was necessary. He was not a berserker charging into battle. He was something far worse. He was a professional. The battle turned. Slowly at first, then all at once. The Kreth fleet began to break apart under the station's counterattack. Their lead ships were crippled. Their fighters were scattered. They had expected easy prey. They had found something else entirely. The Kreth commander sent a message demanding terms of surrender. Taiho responded on open channel. His voice was still calm, soft, even. But his words carried across every ship in the system. You attacked the hospital station. You fired on refugee ships. You targeted escape pods with families inside. He paused. There will be no terms. There will be no surrender accepted. There will be no mercy. Yuna watched his face as he spoke. There was no rage there. No satisfaction. Only a cold certainty that made her blood run cold. Every species in this sector will know what happens when you threaten those under human protection. That is your legacy. That is all you will leave behind. The Kreth flagship tried to run. It did not get far. Taiho had anticipated the retreat. Human and Valari ships were waiting. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Kreth fleet. Not a single enemy ship escaped. Not a single enemy crew was taken prisoner. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Afterward, Yuna found Taiho in their quarters. He was sitting on the floor beside the cherry tree. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wet with tears. I hate this, he whispered. I am so good at this, and I hate it so much. Yuna sat down beside him. She did not know what to say. She had watched him kill thousands without blinking. Now she watched him weep for the lives he had taken. Both versions of him were real. Both existed in the same man. The Dardaner and the Executioner. The Healer and the Destroyer. She finally understood why the great empires avoided human space. Why the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had learned to leave humans alone. It was not because humans were the strongest. There were species with bigger ships and better weapons. It was not because humans were the most advanced. A dozen elder races had technology beyond human understanding. It was because humans could love unconditionally and kill without hesitation. Because the distance between their warmth and their wrath was a single heartbeat. Because they would weep for their enemies after destroying them completely. The galaxy had learned a simple truth. You could trade with humans. You could befriend humans. You could live peacefully beside humans for generations. But if you ever threatened what they loved, if you ever made them choose between mercy and protection, they would choose protection every single time. And they would never stop until you were gone. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy like fire. Within days, every major species knew what had happened. A raider fleet had attacked the small station defended by humans and Valari. The raiders had outnumbered the defenders 4-1. The raiders had been completely destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship, every crew. No survivors. The message was clear. Delegations began arriving at the station within weeks. First came the small species, the ones who had always lived in fear of stronger neighbors. They wanted protection. They wanted to know if the humans would extend their shield to others. Then came the medium powers, civilizations that had survived by staying out of larger conflicts. They wanted trade agreements, technology sharing. They wanted to be seen standing beside humans rather than apart from them. Finally, the great empires sent their observers. They did not ask for alliances. They were too proud for that. But they watched. They studied. They tried to understand what made humans different. Yuna stood beside Taiho as delegation after delegation arrived. She served as a bridge between species, translating not just words, but ideas. She explained human customs to confused aliens. She explained alien concerns to patient humans. The treaty that ended the Human-Valari War was amended. It grew. What had begun as a simple peace agreement became something larger. A framework for cooperation. A promise of mutual defense. A new order in this part of the galaxy. They are afraid of you, Yuna told Taiho one evening as they watched another diplomatic ship depart from the station. All of them. Even the great empires. They pretend otherwise, but I can see it in their eyes. Taiho did not smile. He looked tired in a way that sleep could not fix. I know. I wish they were not. You saved thousands of lives in that battle. Probably millions, when you count everyone the Kreth would have taken as slaves. I know that too. He turned to face her. But Yuna, I also killed thousands. I gave orders that turned living beings into ashes. I did it efficiently. I did it well. And that is what scares them. Not that we fought back, but that we were so good at it. Yuna understood. She had written her final report for Valari High Command weeks ago. It had taken her many drafts to find the right words. In the end, she had kept it simple. Humans are not conquerors, she had written. They do not want your worlds. They do not want your resources. They are content to live in their small corner of the galaxy, trading and exploring and building their strange bonds with everything around them. But they have a limit, a line that cannot be crossed. If you threaten what they love, they will respond with a fury that cannot be stopped. They will not negotiate. They will not accept surrender. They will continue until the threat is eliminated. I have watched humans cry over dying plants. I have watched them risk their lives to save wounded enemies. I have watched them form attachments to machines and animals and strangers they met only hours before, and I have watched the same humans destroy a fleet without mercy. These two things are not contradictory. They are connected. Humans fight so fiercely precisely because they love so deeply. Every attachment is a reason to fight. Every bond is a line that enemies cross at their own risk. The great empires have learned this lesson. They have learned to leave humans alone. They trade with humans. They exchange ambassadors with humans. They treat humans with careful respect. But they do not threaten humans. Not anymore. I recommend that the Valari Empire follow this example. Make peace with humanity. True peace. Become their friends if possible. Become their allies if we are fortunate. Because I have looked into human eyes. I have seen their capacity for love. And I have seen what happens when that love is threatened. We do not want to see it again. The High Council had accepted her report without comment. Ambassador Keth had resigned his position shortly afterward. A new ambassador arrived, younger and more open to change. The first Valari cultural exchange students went to Earth. The first human tourists visited Valari homeworld. Peace held. Not the fragile peace of exhausted enemies, but the growing peace of former enemies becoming something more. 3 years after the wedding, the cherry tree in their quarters finally bloomed. Pink flowers covered its branches for the first time. They were small and delicate and perfect. Taiho invited everyone on the station to see them. Humans and Valari crowded into the garden section. They stood together under the flowering branches. Some of the Valari children had never seen flowers before. Their eyes were wide with wonder. They will fall in about 2 weeks, Taiho explained to the children. That is what cherry blossoms do. They bloom and then they fall. But next spring, they will bloom again. A young Valari girl tugged on Yuna's uniform. "Will you teach us how to grow trees like this?" Yuna looked at the child, then at Taiho, then at the crowd of humans and Valari, standing together under branches that should not exist on a space station far from Earth. "Yes," she said. "I believe I will." Later, when the visitors had left, Yuna and Taiho sat alone beneath the cherry tree. Pink petals fell around them like snow. "I never understood why your people gave me those seeds," Yuna admitted. "At our wedding, I thought it was just a strange human custom." Taiho picked up a fallen petal and held it gently. "Cherry blossoms remind us that beautiful things do not last forever, that we should appreciate what we have while we have it, that endings are part of life." He looked up at her. His brown eyes were warm, but deep inside them, she could still see the steel. The warrior who protected what he loved without mercy or limit. "But they also remind us that spring always comes again," he continued. "That after every ending, there is a new beginning. That hope can grow even in the darkest places." Yuna thought about everything she had learned. About humans and their strange ways. About their terrifying capacity for both love and violence. About why no empire dared to fight them anymore. "Your species is impossible," she said finally. "You know that?" Taiho smiled. The same sad, warm smile he had given her on their wedding day. "We know," he replied. "We think that is our best quality." And sitting there under falling petals, with her impossible husband beside her, Yuna finally understood why she had stopped writing reports about human weaknesses. Because in the end, their greatest weakness and their greatest strength were exactly the same thing. They cared too much. About everything. About everyone. And that made them absolutely terrifying. And absolutely wonderful. And absolutely worth knowing.